listeners. Matt and I just wrapped up a great conversation with Brian Glass. Brian and I are connected on LinkedIn. I had actually I'd seen where he had received a call in through his intake, and they had clearly leveraged ChatGPT to prepare for the conversation for the firm. Had a lot more questions, and he was just speaking to the consumer change. And so we invited him on to the show to talk about this, because every lawyer out there, especially those who are actually showing up in large language models like ChatGPT, are starting to see more and more of these phone calls. And in turn, they're seeing a pretty dramatic shift in how they have to handle these intakes and respond to these potential claimants in an effort to sign them up. So this is an important topic, and Brian just delivers. He gave tons of great insights, practical strategies he's using at his firm to be able to lean into this consumer change. Matt, what was your take?
Yeah, I mean, look, this situation's not going away, right? It's happening more and more often where callers, potential clients are calling in armed with information from their AI of choice. And it's really they're putting the intake people to the test. And I think Brian does a great job of explaining how this really is an opportunity to lean in and to meet those prospects where they are. This is happening in, just virtually every business. And I think, the businesses that are willing to lean into that, embrace it for what it is, not only from an intake standpoint, but we also touched a little bit on when it's already an existing client. And they're kind of Monday morning quarterbacking your handling of the case. And Brian's got some great practical advice on how to handle that situation as well.
You're going to enjoy the show. If you haven't subscribed, we encourage you to click that subscribe button so that we can keep you updated on all the latest trends in legal marketing. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another LAWsome episode. I'm your host, Tanner Jones, along with my co-host, Matt Smyers. We're kicking off this episode with Brian Glass. He's the partner and personal injury attorney at Ben Glass Law. And today's topic is the ChatGPT client strikes again. Every lawyer's new headache. Welcome, Brian.
Tanner and Matt, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is, before we jump into the headaches, like with every headache or challenge for a business, there are opportunities. And so that's really where we're going to spend some time today, and seeing this consumer journey continue to evolve when people are hiring law firms online. But Brian, before we get started into that, for those who may not be as familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to work in the legal space.
Sure. So, it's kind of one and the same, right? I work with my dad now at Ben Glass Law. It hasn't always been the case. I graduated law school in 2008, I like to say, into the teeth of the Great Recession, on that wave of kids that was all of us were promised $160,000 careers fresh out of law school, and those kind of disappeared by 2008, 2009. And so my first job was at a general practice firm making $60,000 a year. And I lasted there for about 4 or 5 months because I could never figure out how to bill. And then I made a pivot and got into personal injury work, which is great for me. And I worked at a firm for about 10 or 11 years, became a partner there. And then in 2019, left that firm to join my dad at Ben Glass Law. I run our car crash practice. He runs our long-term disability practice. And we've got, as of today, 4 lawyers and about 25 team members, probably 2/3 in Fairfax, Virginia, and the other third across the globe in the Philippines, Honduras, Belize. I think those are the 4 countries that we cover. Yeah.
So the AI informed client, the ChatGPT client, something that we're seeing more of in our business. And we know that law firms are experiencing this as well. And I think we might segment this into 2 different distinct parts. One being, how is it impacting intake for law firms? But then beyond that, once they're in and a client, how is it impacting the client? So let's start from an intake perspective. Are you seeing more and more callers calling in armed with information from AI?
And I promise you that this is true, but my intake director came to me last week and said, I think that people are prompting AI and ChatGPT specifically while I'm on the phone with them, because I can hear a keyboard rattling in the background, and there's a pause after I answer a question, then they have the next question. And it's a more sophisticated level of questions than we've been getting in the past. And, we're relatively small volume firm. We sign up somewhere between 30 and 40 clients a month. And so I said to her, I don't know if this is a blip or if this is a trend, but I've kind of had the similar conversations with 2 or 3 clients recently too, where it feels like you're being mined for information, and then they take that information back, and then they either call or they email with another set of questions. So yes, we are seeing a better informed class of clients. I think in the near term, it presents problems for lawyers who are concerned about the number of cases that you sign up every single month, right? In the long term, I think it's going to be a stage and we'll get through it, because just because you can identify the problems or get some answers or some additional questions from ChatGPT doesn't mean that you can actually solve the problem, which is what lawyers are here for. And so I think we're going to get to the other side of this and find that we're trying to unscrew up a bunch of client cases, or you have a bunch of people who, maybe thought it was the easy kind of thing they could do on their own, and then the insurance adjuster or the realities of the world taught them otherwise. So, for as long as there's been the internet, there's been this access to information. Information now is just at your fingertips very, very quickly, and always offering to give you the next whatever it is when it answers your question. And so this is just another phase that we'll get through.
Yeah, I think you're right that it's here to stay. How it's responded to and how firms start to handle more and more callers coming in, either armed with the information ahead of time or even, as you said, in real time. Mm-hmm. They're prompting and getting responses and asking more detailed questions. So, if we all assume that this is here to stay, that we're going to be dealing with a more well-informed consumer calling the law firm, what are some ways from an intake standpoint that firms can see this as an opportunity and really lean into that?
Asking more questions, right? And I told my intake director that she should go get on Car Sales Guy TikTok. Do you see any of these? No. They're car sales trainers, right? Andy Elliott is one of them. Grant Cardone kind of started there. But they are phenomenal at asking you questions to identify what your real objection is and what your real incentives or your real desires from hiring a lawyer or getting your problem solved or whatever it is. And the more that we can be in the driver's seat, not providing information, but asking questions about what the client really wants, the more sales you're going to make. And so if you haven't been down the TikTok or the Instagram or the YouTube shorts rabbit hole with these sales trainer guys, that is a worthwhile place to spend some time.
Yeah, that's a great point, because they were one of the first industries really to be impacted by this, not with AI specifically, but we've all been there, right? We're so much more educated as a car buyer now than we were, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they had to adapt.
That's such a great point, because cars are the ultimate commodity, and injury lawyers are at the risk of commoditizing ourselves through the use of AI, right? Use AI in your marketing starts looking like everybody else. You use an AI product to generate your demand packages start looking like everybody else. And so really the customer is shopping maybe on price, maybe on how easy or hard it is to deal with you. I don't think they're shopping for the best injury lawyer, because how do you even know? How can you tell, If I hire you to do my website, it probably looks better than if I hired somebody else to do my website. And that's not really the barometer of if somebody is a good lawyer or not. The quickest way to get $1 million case is to start with the $2 million case and do a bad job of handling it, right? But that number still has 7 digits when I put it on my website in the results section. And so I don't think the consumer can actually tell who are good lawyers and who are bad lawyers.
Well, I think you hit on the point of, one, you're talking with your intake manager. And I heard that. I love that. And I think our listeners hopefully are having conversations with the ones leading intake within their firms, and keeping their ear on the ground, hearing what consumers are asking and how that process is going. So I applaud you for that, Brian.
But the number one thing that we did to improve our revenue and our profit and the amount of people that we're able to serve is to bring in full-time in-person intake in-house, right? Just like every small firm, we went through lawyer handling all the intake to you have a receptionist who does some triage and the lawyer makes a sale, to you hire somebody overseas, to you outsource some of it. But bringing somebody who deeply believes that we are great lawyers in-house and who is personally offended when somebody doesn't hire us has been the number one thing that we've done to grow our law firm in the last, Chris has been with us 3 years now.
I love that. That's powerful. Talking through the suggestion to ask more questions, that's just, sales 101. I think it's an incredible place for training to begin. Have you explored, and I'm sure you actually referenced some risks involved in clients handling or botching their own case. What are some of those big risks that you anticipate or that you've personally observed when someone's a client in particular is over-relying on AI generated information?
Yeah, well, every state's different, right? And so there's all kinds of little traps to screw up your case. So for instance, in Virginia, now if you have a liability case and maybe you have an underinsured motorist claim, in Virginia several years ago changed the law and you can settle with a liability carrier and maintain your claim against the underinsured motorist carrier, but you have to do it in a very particular way and the release has to spell out exactly what you're doing. And probably 50% of the time when we settle a liability case by agreement with an insurance company, we still get a full general release, which would not preserve your underinsured motorist claim. So that would be a very easy way to screw up and cost yourself $50, $100, $150,000 if you're a client. Short of that, short of missing a statute of limitations, there's very little that you can't undo, I think, if you give it enough time, right? I can unscrew up a bad demand letter. If you've gotten appropriate medical care, then you really can't cause yourself too many problems, except if you screw up the billing, right? If you don't understand that in your state, health insurance goes first or there are liens. So I think there, in an injury case, there's very little that you can actually screw up, but the few things that you can be catastrophic.
The armchair quarterback client has always been an issue for lawyers, right? Mm-hmm. In the midst of a case. Why didn't you take this deposition? Why didn't you ask this particular question? Questioning strategy, et cetera. Are you seeing more of that with the AI armed ChatGPT client?
Oh, yes. And you can tell because you will get these emails that are completely different than any other email the client has ever sent you. And I have a guy now, God bless him. He's got a brain injury. But he emails me 2-3 times a night and it's clear that he's just taken the last thing that I sent him and he's fed it through ChatGPT. And I said to him once, it's obvious to me that what you're doing is you're taking my email and putting it through ChatGPT. Number one, you're violating and you're screwing up your attorney-client privilege. Okay. You need to be aware of that. You can make that decision if you want, but just be aware. But number two, you hired me to give you professional advice. So please trust my professional advice. And he said, to his credit, yeah, I'm doing that. And the reason that I'm doing it is because I have a brain injury and this helps you process. So, okay, I understand that. But yes, we are seeing these things come back and it's always like asking about a fringe case that doesn't apply or is pulling from some other state's law or something like that. And the response that lawyers that I see on lawyer message boards or on Facebook is the same response that we had to social media, right? When you had clients who had a back injury that was posting their parasailing photos, which is like, just put a social media ban in your retainer agreement, right? So what? So we have something else that we can fight over at the end of the case because you agreed to do X and then you agreed not to do X and then you did it anyway. And so I don't know how we solve this because your clients are still going to go out and check your work with ChatGPT. I think you just have to call it out when you see it and do it in a respectful manner and remind the client that they're paying you good money, right? It's more than $20 a month to ask you questions and that they should rely on your questions. But also you should answer these things. You have to respond, and it's probably better to pick up the phone and respond than it is to do it in an email back. Right. I have always found that if we can't solve whatever the conflict or the misunderstanding is within 1 or 2 emails, if I just pick up the phone, I can get it solved with you. There's something about talking to another person that's that helps them understand better and builds trust, which ultimately they're going to ChatGPT because they don't trust the thing that you've said.
That's powerful. Yeah, I mean, you haven't said it directly, but everything I'm hearing is the importance of leaning into customer service and being patient in that process. I mean, you said this will all come full circle, and there will be more of a realization, hopefully globally, and trusting professional advice. But I'm interested in your what's your prediction and where all this is going? Do you have any thoughts in terms of there being a legal bot that's actually negotiating with other insurance company bots? What's your vision for that?
I have a tremendous fear that my friends at Even Up are going to take all their client data from the last 7 years and launch an Arizona alternative business structure and compete directly on settlement, just go directly to market. I think that's a real risk. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. And every time I talk to Ray and I ask him if that's in his plans, he says no. But I'm surprised that nobody has gone directly to market with the AI-backed settlement. You know, outside of these, there are firms that are running these crappy lead gen ads about the AI bot that'll calculate the value of your whatever. There's nobody who's actually doing it. So I think that's probably where we're headed. I think I'm surprised that insurance companies haven't done it. And maybe they have behind the scenes, like Allstate had Colossus for a long time, although that was 2 decades ago now. The big machine that would evaluate the medical bills and records and spit out a settlement number. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't come behind with big data and generated, like, here's the bands that you can settle the case within, and fire the whole set of frontline adjusters and just keep the people that have been doing it for 25 years who on the high level cases. I'm surprised that nobody has done that yet. And I think I would be surprised if we don't get there within the next 3 years. But then back to your point, that was what Carvana was for car dealerships, right? It was, you're buying a commodity. Here's the commodity. And CarMax did this first. We've removed all of the stress of dealing with the people that you don't like, the car dealers, and nobody likes lawyers, by the way. So we've removed all of that stress, and we've just given you the price. But people still go and buy cars from dealers, and I think people will still go and buy cars from lawyers. But it'll be back to that trust factor, because that's the thing that you won't get from the bot.
Any final thoughts or advice for our listeners in terms of being able to adapt and stay ahead with these types of changes?
Injury lawyers are really good at this. If you're not an injury lawyer, it is worthwhile going to a plaintiff's law conference and just seeing what's on the bleeding edge of AI. Even if you are a trust and estates, criminal, business transaction, whatever, like, the plaintiff's bar is light years ahead of the rest of the legal field in terms of the implementation of AI. In part because most lawyers, it's not good for their business model to have a machine do in 9 minutes what they used to be able to bill, 3 hours for. Right? Just the incentives are not aligned. So understand what's out there and take the best of what's out there and weave it into a structure that, with a great team that builds trust with people that you like working for. Because at the end of the day, that's what we could all make more money with just a computer that did all of our business for us. But it probably would be a very quick way to put ourselves out of business, because you would run out of the trust and you would run out of the human factor, which is even for firms that are heavily reliant on digital marketing, most of your big dollar cases are going to come from a referral from somebody else, past client, former client, somebody in your professional network, right? And everybody kind of knows this, right? But we are very quick to try to hire the AI replacement because it's faster. And I think in the near term, yes, but in the long term, that's a mistake.
Yeah, don't do it at the cost of that experience for the client. That's good stuff. I appreciate your insights, Brian. Really enjoyed the discussion. How can our listeners contact you?
So it's benglasslaw.com. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. My name, Brian Glass. So reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks again.